you. Thank you very much, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. Did you enjoy last night?
Yeah.
Excellent. If I could just have the lights dimmed a bit. No, is that better for everyone? Yeah. Great. So what we're going to do is talk about the policy, the reason for the policy seed. Yeah, I haven't clicked it yet. Oh. You're on the ball. And I don't want to pronounce the name that Natalie pronounced yesterday for the silver thatch, because I won't be able to do the Latin name, but this is one of the silver thatch seeds, and I thought it was appropriate to start with that. Now, we're from all over the Caribbean here, so what I'd like to do is see a show of hands, first of all, which of our countries of those present here, or territories, have developed culture and or heritage plans? Can I just see a show of hands? So who has actually developed? Could you call the country out? BVI? Yes, it's Aruba. Jamaica has, and I think it's actually gone through a reiteration as well, right? So those three. And who is working on it? Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, and Cayman Islands. And who has it on the radar somewhere? And of course the USA, I'm sure they have a pretty healthy, yeah. And so no matter what it's called, whether it's culture, heritage, arts and media and culture, there are different iterations of it, but it just goes to show how much work we all have with working towards this. So we're one of the associate members down here. We have many of us are here present in the room from various places, and so it's a really great chance to catch up and to check up with each other as to what we're doing with our culture and heritage policies. Now, the first thing to do is start, as I say, at the beginning. What is the reason? Why bother? Why even have a policy and plan? If it's not broken, why fix it? We know we have amazing culture and heritage organizations, and so why do we even need to do this? The reason we want to do this, and the reason that these are a good idea, is to adopt and implement a set of coherent principles, objectives, and means to protect and foster cultural expression and preserve unique lines of heritage. This is Miss Carmen Connolly. She was there last night at Lucia, and she's one of the best and the most senior thatch artists, and she's working with 2 young people. So why bother do it? I'm not going to talk too much about the process, about the kind of dry standard bits. I'm going to talk about all the bits in between, the really interesting bits. What we've done so far is the 2 areas that are underlined, the agenda and the formulation. Now we need to move on to adoption, implementation, evaluation. Revisions are constant. Why bother? There are several reasons why we should bother to develop a culture and heritage policy and plan. And one of the main reasons is that we have one of the largest immigration rates in the world. This is actually taken from the 2016 CIA World Factbook. And actually we have the Cayman Islands as number 4. And to put that into context, BVI, our colleague in the room, is number 2. And I think number 200 is Trinidad and Tobago. The United States was in the 30s. So it goes to show that these are all the pushes and pulls. It's not a threat, but it's a push and a pull, and how it's affecting our culture, the way we live and the way we interact together. One of the beauties of the Cayman Islands is that, and I'm not glossing over the fact that there are issues within various demographics and things, but we do, for the most part, we are renowned for living together quite peaceably despite our many differences. I think we've done very well. There was a question, I just added the picture on the top right. This was the gallery staff several years ago when we were in the previous building. There was a question on diversity. I can't remember who asked it. And you can see how diverse we are. Again, lack of men, so we really need more men in the industry. If I've got the copyright for the photo, I've put it on there. If not, I think it's out in the public domain. The second reason, so the vast immigration rate, okay? We rely on about, I think it's about 50-50 roughly. Okay, I don't have the exact figure with me. But the other reason is because we're so young. If we're about 500 years of tangible and intangible cultural heritage, okay, you compare that with the thousands and thousands of years that some other countries around the world have. It's phenomenal. So the little bit that we do have, it's so special to protect it, and we don't have a lot of legislation in place. We have little legislation in place, but fantastic organizations, so we need to protect this. This is an example of our beautiful vernacular Caribbean, Caymanian architecture. A lot of the seafarers, when they went around, they set up in the southern United States, and they brought back some of that architectural influence, and that's important to say. This, I just added this slide because this is very topical right now. This is Smith Barcadere, otherwise known as Smith Cove. So the fact that, let's backtrack now, we have a large rate of immigration, we have lacking in legislation to protect our built heritage, and more that we can do with intangible as well. And this is a prime example. This site, which is a very, very important cultural site and geological site, was at threat of not being developed at this part here in the middle, but to the left it would have had condos overlooking it. There was a massive public outcry here just last week, and what happened was the Honourable Premier, who's the Minister of Culture, stepped in the Legislative Assembly because they're in session now, and spoke to the government's realization of how important it is for the people of the Cayman Islands, and in the absence of having legislation that speaks to development close to or on these sites, he stepped in and said we need to purchase it. So I don't know the ins and outs of that, but that is going ahead, and that was really listening to the people there. So we really need to develop the policy because of this. This is Captain Kem Jackson. He's a senior, he's a captain, boat builder. Several industries, this is the fourth reason, several industries, for example, boat building and thatch crafting, are in danger of becoming obsolete. Now, to safeguard against that, okay, we need the fiscal resources and the human resources to ensure that there are programs, there's funding to promulgate and to educate young ones, because Mr. Captain Kem, okay, and Miss Carmen and a lot of these people, they're getting older, and what's going to happen, they need to transmit that to the next generation. And the next generation is very, very interested. We just need to make sure that that handoff happens, both in the school system and one-on-one. Okay, so before I go too much on, I was really inspired by Michelle Gates Moresi yesterday with the National Museum of African American History and Culture. She said at the most basic level, you have to think, I believe, you have to give thought about this, you have to plan. So that's why, at the end of the day, starting at the beginning, that's why we need a culture policy and plan, okay? Imagine building anything. Imagine what these guys are doing, setting up their new museum for the Smithsonian. Imagine doing anything without a plan, without a strategy. That's all we're doing. That's simplifying it. That's all we're doing, but it's absolutely critical, and it's amazing how, and part of the reason so many of the organizations here have worked is because they all have fantastic plans. The museum's just got a 5-year strategic plan set. The National Gallery, Natalie's worked really hard on, I think, a 5 or 10-year plan. So they've all worked independently, and that's fantastic, but we need now a national plan to draw it all in. Okay, so we're talking about now how we'll all go in different directions. If you look at these little soldier crabs in the soldier crab race, as if they're all the organization, and it's fine, we don't want to come in, government doesn't want to come in, government's listening to the people. The last thing a policy and plan should do is come down with a heavy hammer and say, no little crabs, you all go in the same direction. But what it wants to do is say, okay, let's communicate, let's talk. What are we building on? What are we going towards? What are our goals and our aims and ambitions? Okay? So we have so many of them. I won't read them all out. We've touched on them. You guys have visited them on a field trip on Sunday. We have statutory authorities and government companies. We have festivals and carnivals, foundations, associations, societies, and clubs. Far too numerous to mention. And I think so incredible considering we're only about 60,000 by population. I think it's just so rich an offering that we have here. Right, over to the steps now. We have the key steps for the policy are, this is the steering committee. In 2014, the Ministry of Culture noted there was a gap. We paid attention to the policy directive of government, along with the previous national policy directives. There was a national plan, a 10-year plan for the Cayman Islands. which would have taken us to 2008, which mentioned the need for this. So we're not reinventing the wheel, we're taking what the people said all these years ago, and that was very comprehensive. They said we needed a culture policy, okay? So in 2014, we did a lot of research, background information. When I came to the ministry 3 years ago, it was the Ministry of Health, as Natalie touched on, health, sport, youth and culture. And we had a fantastic health policy that my colleague Janet here works on. We have sports policy, we have a youth policy, and there was absolutely nothing for culture. And it wasn't because people had just thought it's not important. It was because there are other competing priorities. And my colleagues know I always go back to the hierarchy of needs. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have to get your bases first, your health and everything else, and go up. And culture, well, it runs throughout because it's part of society, but self-actualization and what we do is at the top. So 2015, Cabinet approved the terms of reference for the steering committee, and we appointed the membership for the steering committee. Many of them are in this room. If you would give a show of hands, that would be appreciated. Okay. And then in 2016, what we did, this is a section of the steering committee at work, was we realized we couldn't do it all ourselves. We had day jobs to do. So we convened these 6. There were actually 7 initially. That was one of the little bumps in the road, but we made it 6. And thanks to Natalie, who took on creative industries and the tourism, cultural tourism aspect in the visual arts. So her chairing job became quite wide. But we have land-based heritage, maritime heritage, performing arts and festivals, visual arts, design, crafts and creative industries, literary arts and oral history, and traditional culture, subcultures, legal and governance. The latter one has changed a bit because we realized that the traditional culture shouldn't just be pocketed off into one. So that one's known as legal and governance, and the traditional culture will emanate right throughout all of the various subcommittees. The next thing we did is a UNESCO-endorsed cultural facilitator. We needed help. We needed somebody to look in from the outside. You know how you can see better when you're coming in from the outside? And also, we are very, very close in Cayman, right? Half of us are related to each other, or we're friends, or we're family, or whatever. So we thought, you know, it might be a bit tricky without that outside person. So we were so lucky. We interviewed, we took it very seriously because I'd seen one of the lessons learned is if you're going to get a facilitator for anything in your organizations, make sure you interview them, because I've learned from past experiences you don't always get the top of the pick, okay? But we interviewed and we got one of the best ones. Her name's Deirdre Prince Solani, and I think she helped with Jamaica. I don't know which iteration of the policy, but she has done some work with Jamaica. And she came down, she did a lot of work with us, and she did a 2-day, right here in this room, facilitated workshop. And then GIS, Government Information Services, we started public communications and awareness. We garnered 600 plus responses to a comprehensive survey, but that can be approved upon because the Economics and Statistics Office said, hey, wait a minute, that wasn't a proper survey by their standards. So we're going to do a proper writer survey with them, hopefully next year. And we held an open house. Here's the Chief Officer, Jennifer Hearn, Councillor McTaggart that you met yesterday speaking. So continuing 2016 now, the facilitator in conjunction with a few of us at the ministry synthesized the information first, and then we sent it up to the steering committee, and we've started to meet almost every second week now to really work through. So we're working through it now, and then step 4 will be public consultation. Once the draft is approved by Cabinet, the first draft for public consultation goes out in November 2016. There's Deirdre on the left and Rita in Mind's Eye, which a lot of you visited. And we hope by January 2017 to produce the final policy and strategic plan. Now, this is my favorite part here, the constant operational plan. I've seen too many policies sit and people complain, another report, another policy. I'm absolutely determined, and part of that is from coming from the operational angle, from being at the National Gallery for so many years. I'm absolutely determined that when we have a policy, we also have a costed operational plan to go with a strategic plan, just to give deadlines and who's going to do what and costs, so that we know that we can actually do this. Otherwise, it's just a pipe dream. And then I think a lot often forgotten is implementation, education and monitoring. Our plan is quite long. Our policy length is 2017 to 27 because we realize sometimes as soon as we start a policy, it's almost time to wrap it up. So lessons learned. How am I doing on time? Good. Lessons learned. we have the first lesson, there's a few of them, I'm about halfway through now. The stakeholders' involvement is absolutely critical to the process, okay? Here's a group of children watching the Queen's Jubilee celebration. Formulating a cultural policy, this is from UNESCO, is not confined to the drafting of a document, however thorough and relevant it may be. It entails creating a new momentum and promoting work methods in the case of institutions and agents responsible for culture in order to attain a common goal and a clear, consistent strategy. It involves promoting the cultural dimension of the society and mobilizing available resources to enable sectors of cultural activity to play their part in economic, social, and human development. Now, one thing to remember with stakeholders is, and I mentioned this to the steering committee and the subcommittees, everyone will bring their baggage or their treasure chest, no matter which way you look at it. So it's just to remember to be aware of what people are bringing, okay? And just be aware of what you're bringing to it. It's okay to bring things, I think, but just to get it on the table and be aware, okay? And I've said from the very beginning, one of my big things that I'm bringing to it is I'm really looking out for the generational Caymanians. I'm always very cognizant that I'm a newer Caymanian, second generation now, right? But my parents are from Jamaica and Scotland, and that's my son on the left, and his two cousins. And typical Cayman, you've got Caymanian, English, Trinidadian, Caymanian, South African, Jamaican. I mean, that is all in one family. That is so typical. But there's about 10% of people who are pure 100% few generations back, and they, I think, are feeling there's a lot of societal things that I don't even know about, but you hear them and read them, and I'm very, very concerned about that. So we have to make sure we eke out something for that, okay? Lessons learned. Advocates in the right places will enable the process. And Chilla van der Meulenbroek mentioned Mr. Rumbo from Guadeloupe, how the power of the individual and how he went to do his own research and started and wanted to work to develop his own museum there. And that was interesting. And we've got a bunch of advocates in the right places. We've got Kiva, who's our little person, our spy in education, and she's just a spitfire of energy. We've got Charles in planning, which will be very useful when we come to work on those legislation later. Okay, so advocacy is very important. Lessons learned. Number 3, the process cannot be rushed. Timelines may shift, okay? This is a wingtip of the MRCU plane. We have health. Health is right there at the base of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We had the Zika and chikungunya viruses affecting us, and we had to fight them. And so when you've got town hall meetings for these things, you don't say, actually, no, I've got this thing going on. No. You have to stop and deal with that. This is, we had Ebola virus disease threats as well, like the rest of the world did. So we just have to watch for that, okay? Competing priorities, not the substantive roles for many relied upon stakeholders, and need time to research, to digest and contextualize. A slight confession here, I have not read in depth all the situation analysis. I just flicked through them. All the subcommittees provided these amazing, they worked together hours, weekends and evenings to make these, to do a sit-down, and some of them were like books. And I haven't had the chance to sit down and read through them, so we extended a little bit, and that's okay. Lessons learned number 4. This is critical, and Deirdre pointed this out. We thought we'd done such a great job by getting these experts around the table in the steering committee, and then we realized that we didn't have a lot of these people around the table, okay? So it's absolutely critical, and it was an eye-opener for some of us. We need the sister islands. We have, where is she? Simone Scott, who's been absolutely pivotal working with the National Gallery over there for years. She's our contact person. We need to hear the voices of children, youth. You can read the list. Very topical right now, LGBT issues happening in Cayman, persons with disability policy has just been developed, all socioeconomic classes, and what came out in the room is non-experts. It's okay if you don't have a master's degree. I know there was some discussion about that yesterday. Somebody mentioned, and I can't remember who it is, but it really touched me yesterday, we need to know when to give up and share power. I think that might have been, no? We need to be aware of the power we have. So yes, it's well and good that I say, oh, you know what, though, I have a multi-colored family, everything's fine, I see it through their eyes. I don't. I see it through my eyes, and I'm privileged. Okay, I have had a lot of privileges that other people haven't. So each of us on the steering committee, I think, needs to be aware of that and move forward. So Deborah yesterday talked about the Honduran influence and the 4% of persons from Honduras. I'm surprised it's so low. The largest percentage, apart from Caymanians, are Jamaicans, and then I think Filipino and so on. But yeah, just really important lesson learned. Expected outcomes. Rather than read through this, I'll let you read it. This is Aunt Julia Hides. She was mentioned yesterday. She's an icon of Caymanian culture, died when she was 106. I'm going to pick out the underlined words, okay? We need to look after, these are the outcomes for the policy and plan. Tangible cultural heritage, intangible cultural heritage, development, redress inequalities. We talked about the status of the artist yesterday. I had one artist I'm working with over the last few weeks who is absolutely on Skid Row now and is desperate for some support. So that will all come out through the policy, but other dynamics as well. Evolving culture and heritage sector, governance and legislation, that should be flipped. Those should be at the top because without the legislation as teeth, it'll be hard to get things done. Here is Mr. Loxley Banks at one of the open houses. Here are the opportunities for future partnerships between the members of the public and the ministry so that it's not just top down, so that it's really sharing the power. Okay. Special forums for the demographics. We need to get out there. We need to get out to the schools, to the university college. We've done one forum. We need to do more. To where people are catching fish, to where people are playing dominoes. So it really needs to be very, very open. Okay. Here's some of the places when I say we need to get out there. To the left is at the Cayman Turtle Centre in their, Tim, I'm not sure, what's the name of the
Cabin Avery.
The Avery, yeah. Yes. And top right, lifestyle fishing. It's about relaxing a bit and seeing how people live, how people act and interact, not just in a formal setting, but out there. And this is an older picture. I love this one of the ladies in their sort of high dresses and long sleeves and the ubiquitous flowery brick and the yard. Okay, so what we need to continue to do is make intra-governmental connections between the responsible governmental ministries, departments, and agencies. So outside of our core, we're all preaching to the choir. We know what we're doing a great job together. But we need to work with other organizations and have them working with us. So on the steering committee we have education, employment and gender affairs representative, and we have someone from tourism and district admin, tourism and transport. We also need more interaction with, and the policy will bring out more interaction with all of these other agencies. Education, Natalie taught yesterday about formalized education in the schools. Planning department, absolutely critical so that the laws are amended so that we have protection, which the National Trust has done a great job starting, but it's nothing in legislation yet. There is a national conservation law which will protect areas of natural conservation, but nothing in terms of cultural sites. Legal department, critical, environmental health. You may query that, but I put a picture of the graves there because we did a project on the cemeteries, and a lot of them are unmarked. There's some beautiful cemeteries similar to this near the Watler Cemetery in Cayman, which are decaying and falling down onto the beach. And they're under the DEH, which is under our ministry, but nothing's been done about them yet. So it's just going to be a fantastic A to Z in time order and in who's going to do it order. That's now the strategic plan. Scholarship Secretariat, Natalie's very, very passionate. I think she sits on it talking about how we need research. It's okay, we need research. We need to, this is now a time where we're going to really locate our identity, and we need to do so much more research and professionalize the industry. University College, we're developing 4-credit courses as well. Okay, so partnerships with cultural and heritage organizations and institutions, and with districts and individuals. I didn't put a list because we've mentioned a lot of them, but these are within the sector of culture and heritage. This is Janet, our policy advisor for health. What's she doing in this workshop held in this room earlier in the year? Well, there's a connection. There's actually art psychotherapies now. There's, you know, they're proving that people, it's basically making that connection. Gina is with Environment, and Carrie, who I think is in the room in the back, is with the National Trust, and Mr. Jarris is with the Catboat Club and Maritime Heritage. So connections. And what will all of this bring? What will the policy and plan bring? Before I move on, there was one more quote by Miss Elliott, also with African American Museum. Sorry. It says, she mentioned something that really struck me. No matter what else, whether the policy is finished by timeline or not, we're making conversation. The point is we're in communication and conversation on this, okay? And the opportunities are going to be endless, okay? There are just so many things being done now, but imagine having a policy and a strategic plan, and imagine having funding, and we already have the political will, and we have the ministry's will and the organizational will and the people's will, and imagine the funding to go with that. We can support all of these things that we're doing. This is a logwood carving here, so the creative industries can be supported. Art, and just for art's sake, not to prove anything. Creativity, opportunities internationally. Here on the left is our flag when we went to Carafesta in Haiti, and here is Bendel Hydes. Some of you may have met him at the opening night. He's based in New York City. Absolutely, really, really talented. A lot of people say, who's Bendel Hydes? We want to change that. Here is Olivia B. on the left at the New York Fashion Show, and Grace Geely. And these people, a lot of their seed, a lot of their sort of start came from our cultural organizations, in particular on the lower right, CNCF, these two, and up there the National Gallery. And of course their own efforts. So thank you very much. I just want to close with one quote before we have question and answers, and that is that the person who wrote The Little Prince, Anton de Saint-Exupéry, it's very hard to pronounce, but he one of his quotes is one of my favorite quotes. It says something along the lines of, most things are invisible except for to love. And I'm doing that all wrong. But it's basically, you know, who knows the quote? Yeah? It's basically, things are invisible to the eye. You have to slow down, you have to listen with your heart, and you have to respond with that. And that is what we're trying to do while being in a ministry and being as formal as we need to be. We are slowing down and listening with our heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That was a great overview of many months of hard work by your team, and really a very wide cross-section of the community, as you said. Don't go away, because we're going to do Q&A. But one word that really kept coming back, because this is a word that Nancy uses a lot and didn't really use today, and I want to share that. You know, the real main purpose of bringing people together for this conversation and the policy at the end of the day is to increase value in our community about our culture and our heritage, because it's often kind of put aside as an extra, as you say. So it's that value content that we're all striving towards, to bring it to the forefront. Everyone does it, everyone lives it, but the value sometimes is missing, and whether that's to do with funding or support or even attending events. Hopefully that will really make inroads to changing that. So we have a few minutes for Q&A, about 10 minutes. I have a microphone, so I am going to walk around and ask that you speak into this so we can record it. Nancy will be at the podium. Questions? Okay.
Charlotte? I think Charlotte had her hand up first. Oh, okay.
You mentioned about not necessarily needing a high-level degree to be involved with being on the committee. How do you feel about having like high school students and upcoming college students being involved as a way to reach out to like younger generations as well? Because I really like that you said basically it's a really inclusive place where you can have a lot of people involved with ideas. Do you have maybe like a youth type of group that throws ideas at you as well? Like how do you go about reaching out to all different types of people?
Right.
I'd like to ask you about
no, that's fine. There are two responses to that. The first is that Throughout my time here at the gallery and now at the ministry, we really started and developed internship programs, scholarship programs, and we always have several young people at the ministry. So we always get them to work on our things to do with the culture and heritage policy. So we're surrounding ourselves with young people. I'm actually a teacher as well. So I think that it's absolutely pivotal. However, on the actual committee, we haven't thought about that. My chief officer is here, so I can't. The thing is, working within a structured system, I'm very mindful of the way up, the ladder. But the chief officer is very open to these things. And for instance, we had Christopher Williams, who Natalie mentioned, wrote the book on the Cayman identity. And he wasn't on the steering committee initially, and I asked the chief officer, and she said he could come as a guest, yes. So I'll take that on board, and I think maybe I could ask the chief officer in front of hundreds of witnesses whether or not we could get a nice young high school student who's interested in this. Yeah. Chilla?
Thank you for your very interesting presentation. It's always nice to see these things in practice. I was wondering what kind of response you've had to the development of the policy from local stakeholders, either in doing the survey or in other ways that you've noticed. How do people feel about it?
Several groups or people feel different things. One of the things, I think for the most part, the response has been very, very positive. Okay, people are like, finally, we're doing this. We've all wanted to do this for so long. This is absolutely wonderful. There's a few things that I can't speak for some of the other directors, but for myself, some people are, remember I said that 8 to 10% who maybe aren't as mixed and are Caymanian, what I call, well, whether or not it's Indigenous, that's a whole topic for research, it's fabulous, but First Peoples who maybe don't have other nationalities mixed in, they're like, well, why is that person who's half from here, half from there, and calls themselves Caymanian, here leading this policy drive? So, you know, there's a myriad of things, and everywhere in the world it's the same, but I keep coming back to the fact that Cayman is so mixed with the percentage. You saw the stats there from the CIA. For the most part, people are excited. People are looking forward to it. Some people don't want to see something written and put on a shelf and get gathering dust. But I think there's a level of trust involved. I think if people have integrity, right, and they are good leaders, right, and you have people like Jennifer chairing it up, okay, you have me, you have Natalie, Dr. Peggy Lesher-Denton, Christina Pineda, who some of you met at the Trust. If you have people who have proven themselves in these sectors time and time again, Jairus Miller, you're going to get more respect and I think more trust in the process. Okay, but I think it's just very important to constantly remind ourselves not to come down like this. And also, I'm a teacher that used to teach kindergarten, so I kind of speak like that sometimes, and I think it might come across a certain way. So we just constantly being mindful. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are out of time.
Timmy has one.
That's why we have to take one question.
That's a great initiative, and having been one of the participants in not at the level most people you mentioned there, but just filling in the form.
But Getty's has from your...
Yeah, Getty's certainly been. Yeah. This is excellent. To what extent has the tourism industry embraced this concept of really going about this thing in such a concerted way? Has that been, have they been engaged or?
Yes, they have been. We have someone from the ministry,
yeah.
The DCO of the Ministry of Tourism, who is sitting on the steering committee actually, so they're right at the top level of the table. And in the subcommittees we have Rosa Harris, I think she might have asked Jessica Powlick to sit in on the, which one is it? The visual arts, design, crafts, creative industry, and cultural tourism, one that Natalie chairs.
Good.
So they're involved.
Because I mean, we sit here.
This.
Right.
We need this to happen.
Exactly, because we look and we see 60,000 people living in the country, but there's 2 million people here every year. You know.
Exactly. Excellent point. Thank you.
So just a round of applause for Nancy.